Hi, I'm Guy Lawrence, and you are listening to the Guy Lawrence podcast. If you're enjoying this content and you want to find out more and join me and come further down the rabbit hole, make sure you head back to guylawrence.com.au. Awesome, guys. Enjoy the show. One, Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks, Guy. Glad to be here. This is sort of a repeat. We've done this once before.
We did, yes. It's been several years, believe it or not. It goes very quickly indeed. Now, I'm going to ask you a question that I ask everyone on the show, and that is, if you were on an airplane and a complete stranger sat next to you and asked you what you did for a living, what would you say?
Well, I guess first it would depend a little bit on my take of the stranger, exactly, who they were, what they were interested in, because I'd get inside their mind a little bit and see where that question came from, and were they really interested, or were they just trying to be polite and make a little conversation, or what? But so it'd make a lot of difference on who it was and what their intent was. But my first thing would probably be to just say, well, I'm retired, okay? And if that was enough, if they say, okay, and then they went off doing their business, then I'd leave it alone. But if they were interested and said, oh, retired, what did you used to do, or whatever, if they were really interested, I'd tell them that I was a physicist and that I had worked about 40 years as a physicist, and that I also was a consciousness researcher. And then I'd wait and see what they did with that. Usually when you tell people you're a physicist, that's the end of the conversation. They don't want to talk to you anymore after that. But the conscious researcher may pique a little interest or may not. They may say, oh, what an odd pairing. But we'd wait and see. If they were interested, it probably wouldn't be in the physics. It would probably be in the consciousness. And then they would probably ask something about, well, what did I do in consciousness and so on. And then I'd begin to tell them a bit of my beginnings in studying consciousness, and that I had ended up writing a set of books, a trilogy that was really a theory of consciousness. Yes, My Big T.O.E. And out of that theory of consciousness, I was able to answer a lot of the unknowns in not only physics, but in metaphysics and philosophy and even theology as well. And that in that process, I have come up with some experiments, some quantum mechanics experiments that I'm trying to get done that will help verify the theory that I bring, the conscious theory. So it's consciousness theory, developing or deriving from first principles physics, quantum theory.
Okay.
And that's kind of what I'm busy doing now. That kind of brings us up. So I'd kind of leave it at that and see if there's anything there that, lights their fire.
You sparked off about 5 questions already, I think, in just that little thing. So I can certainly relate to that. And probably then the first question I would ask you, Tom, especially thinking about for listeners as well, if you studied consciousness for 40 years, how would you define, what is consciousness? Like, how would you define it?
Okay, consciousness is awareness, but it's a little more than awareness. So there's 2 attributes to it. One is that it is aware. It is aware. So it's self-aware, but it's also aware of its environment. So it's just aware. Self-aware really isn't enough. Well, I guess it would be enough, but it'd be very limiting. It also needs to be aware of its environment. The second attribute is that it makes choices. It is an information system, so it communicates. It interacts with information. It gathers information. And when it gathers information, it also can create information, can, both receive and send, if you will, and process. So I'd say that's what consciousness is. It is an awareness with a finite decision space. Now, I define decision space as all the choices that you know that you have. Okay, that's your decision space. Okay. So if you only have 10 choices and that's it, or at least that's all you know you have, then that defines your decision space. It's those 10 choices. But maybe you really have like 100 choices, but you're only aware of 10 of them. Well, your decision space is still just 10 choices. It's just what you're aware of. So you have different capacities in consciousness, mainly based on different size of decision space. So a dog or a cat is conscious, but their decision space is very small, say, compared to, a human being. Human beings have a lot more things going on in their life, a lot more information that they deal with and that they process, and conclusions that they can come to, and things that they can understand, and so on. So that's the difference between various levels of consciousness, is basically the size of the decision space, and also the ability with which they're able to do that processing and manipulate that decision space. So consciousness is an awareness of both self and environment, and it makes choices. Okay, so that's its thing. And to make those choices, just by definition, if you're going to make a choice, then you have free will. If you don't have free will, then there's no choice to make. You see, everything is already done. So free will implies that you make choices. So that's, if there is no free will, then there are no choices. So the fact that we say this, so that's how I define consciousness. Those are the two components that make something conscious. So now if we look at, we looked at dogs and cats, we'll say, well, okay, definitely we see they make choices. They choose to do things. They're not just hardwired instinct. They can think about something and decide to do it this way or do it that way, or to do it or not to do it. And they obviously make choices. You tell them to sit, they may decide to sit, or they may decide that we really don't want to right now because you're getting close to putting the food bowl down and they're excited. So they can make those choices. We get to a rock and that doesn't qualify because it makes no choices. The rock just sits there. We get to a sunflower, and we know sunflowers will track the sun. They'll move the flower around to keep it facing the sun, but that's just hardwired. The sun heats up one side of the stalk, and the other side is cooler, and that causes the torsion in the stalk to keep the head moving around. You see, so we can understand that and say that's just a hardwired. That's like algorithmic. It's just part of the code. It's not really a choice. So then we get into other kinds of critters that we don't really know, like clams. Okay, what about a clam? Well, a clam is reactive. If the clam's sitting there in the sand and it's got its foot out, pushing itself around, if you reach in and tap that foot will get jerked back inside the shell pretty quickly. Well, is that a choice? Is the clam saying, oh, something hit my foot, I don't know what it is, I better get my foot out of there and get it back in the shell? Or is that just hardwired? Well, we don't know. So there's a lot of critters that kind of fall in the gray area of really don't know whether what they're doing is hardwired or not. And then we look at things like trees, and we say, well, trees seem to have some awareness of their environment. Now, we don't know for sure whether they make choices or not. Some recent work has been done that shows hugely complex interactions at the root level between plants, trees, and various fungi and bacteria, and all sorts of things are at interplay. There's lots of variables going on, so it's a pretty complex interaction going on. And we see they seem to intentionally do things, but whether or not that is hardwired, they're just doing what they do because that's hardwired in their genetics, or whether that's something they're doing on purpose, making choices, I don't think we know yet for sure. Those are the hard things to test. They're very difficult things to come to a conclusion whether a plant or a clam is making a free will choice or whether it's just doing what it does.
Yeah.
Because for the clam anyway, the series of choices it has is very limited. So it's hard to tell. With these trees and root systems, they're pretty complex. So I suspect biologists will one day be able to decide whether they are actually responsive in a creative way, or whether every stimulus that's the same gets the same response, which is what you get in a hardwired situation.
Yeah.
So, but at least trees do seem to be aware at some level, but I'm not convinced that they make choices yet. Perhaps we'll know that, and it's not that I'm not convinced that I think they don't. I just don't know. There's not enough science in to let us know whether at that level the choices are just biologically hardwired in their DNA, or whether they're actually thinking about things. It seems with the complexity, they may be thinking about things. But even if we give a tree the the ability to be conscious, let's say we find that out. I don't know if it's true or not, but if we find that out, it doesn't mean that their consciousness is like our consciousness. Our consciousness is not like a dog's consciousness, and not like a bumblebee's consciousness. So consciousness comes in all various levels of decision space and ability to process. So just because you're conscious doesn't mean you're conscious like a human. You see, there's lots of variation in consciousness.
Yeah. Should we welcome that decision making choices? Because choices seem to be the theme of, if we're consciousness is an awareness and we're constantly making choices, because quite often we can avoid making decisions through life. And
that's a choice too.
That's a choice too. Yeah.
That's a choice. If you decide I'm going to do nothing and I'm not going to make a choice, well, that's a choice. That's always one of the choices that you have. Even if even if there's a choice A and only choice A, you still have the two choices of pick A or don't do anything at all. So there's always a choice, even if it's a very small number.
Got it. And there's always a consequence from that choice, regardless.
Always a consequence. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And I talking about choices and things. One thing that I've been really love about you, Tom, and like I've looked at a lot of your videos, and for somebody that says they're retired, you're a very busy person.
I am indeed.
It's quite incredible. And the one thing that shone through from me from the start is that you have this ability just to say it as it is and not really worry about what people say or think, or if you challenge their beliefs or whatever it is. It's quite incredible. And I found with myself over the years, I used to find it quite difficult to just speak my truth and just be. Has that always been like that for you as well? Or like, have you always?
Yes, I've never had any trouble with that. That's because I really don't have anything to sell. You see, I'm not selling an idea. I'm not trying to get people to agree with me. That's the difference. If you're trying to get people to agree with you, then every time somebody says something disagrees with you, you feel like you need to correct it. You need to fix it. You need to argue the point. Well, I'm not interested in people agreeing with me. I'm just putting out my view of reality, if you will. And if people can use it and it means something to them and they find value in it, then good. If they can't use it and they don't find value in it, well, then leave it alone, walk away from it. So that is my idea. My Big Toe is basically a work that helps individuals find their own big toe. And that's why I put the mine in. It's my big toe. Not because I was so proud of it that it's mine, but it's that if it's not your experience, it's not your truth. So you can't take my big toe and make it your big toe. You have to create your own. So I'm just giving a structure for people to create their own big toe. So what they end up with, I don't, what's the euphemism? I don't have a dog in that fight. That's not my business what they come up with. That's their own business, trying to live their own life in their own way with what they understand, with their own prejudices and their own knowledge and their own beliefs and fears and whatever. They have to find something that works for them. So I'm setting up basically a process and a set of understandings that people, if they read my books, can look at it and find their own experience in there. Oh, yeah, I had experiences and this sort of explains them. And before I didn't have an explanation. Well, good. I've given them structure to hang their own experience on. And as long as they can do that, fine. But if they have no experience that they can hang on the structure of MBT, well, then MBT is not a useful book for them. They should just walk away from it and leave it. You know, it's not something that they can use. So if you got nothing to sell, then you've got no inclination to really try to fix people's thoughts about, you know, what you're saying. You can't change anybody else. You can only change yourself. So everybody who grows up to get a bigger picture of what's going on in the world and what, you know, reality is like, they have to get there on their own. It can't be given to them, because if you only get it intellectually, it really doesn't matter that much. It means that you can carry on a good conversation, but it doesn't mean that you grow up any, that you actually are gaining anything important from it other than the ability to have a conversation. So there's no point in pushing people. They have to go at their own speed and their own way. So if somebody says, oh, that's a bunch of nonsense and this doesn't work and that doesn't work and, you know, none of this could possibly be true, I'm all right with that. That's just where they are. That's where they need to be.
Yeah.
You need to be where you are. You know, that's kind of step one, is be authentic, right? Be who you are, where you are. And, you know, so that's where they need to be. It's not like that's a fault because they don't see it my way. That's not a fault. They're not me. It's just where they are, and they are exactly where, you know, they've put themselves, and they have to deal with that. So that's why I've never really had an inclination to, you know, to worry about what people say about it. I just lay it out there, and if you can use it, use it, and if you can't, let it go.
Yeah, yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think as well, you mentioned the word authentic, and what's been interesting, speaking just from my own personal journey, Tom, is that I actually thought I was kind of on path and living this way, this direction, and evolving and just trying to be open-minded. But then I realized I wasn't actually being authentic or true to myself. I thought, oh, it was almost like I was telling myself I'm right, but I wasn't actually happy. Mm-hmm. And then I had to almost let all that stuff go. And I didn't even realize I was carrying it for a while, for years. It built. Yeah. And I seem to see that in common themes with everyone. You know, mm-hmm. Why do you think we behave like that?
Well, we behave like that for several reasons. One, you know, acting is always easier than being. You know, you can act a role is a simpler thing than being a role. You know, let's say you decide that being kind is a nice thing to be, and that good people are kind people. So you make that decision. This is intellectual. And now you see people who need your help, then you go over and you act kindly toward them. You help little ladies across the street. You know, you know, help you know, an older person pick their groceries up, you know, after they spill out of the bag, and they're kind to people. But if you're doing it because you think you should be, it's not causing you to grow up, and it's still not going to make you happy. You're not going to feel good. There's a difference between acting kind and being kind, and the difference is in the intent. It's in the motivation. You see, one is an intellectual thing that you just do. So you might say that kindness is part of your image. You have a self-image that you're a kind person, or an intelligent person, or an open-minded person, or whatever. And you have this image of yourself, and you believe that that's a good way to be, so you start acting that way. Well, that will just leave you empty because you're acting, you're not being. You have to be kind, you have to be open-minded, you know, you have to be these things, and that takes work. To be kind, you have to change who you are. To actually be kinder, then you need to, you know, the being is basically who you are. So you have to change who you are, not just how you act. So that's the thing. And until you change who you are, you're not making any progress. Good. Now you're being easier to get along with because you're trying to be open-minded, and you're acting at these things that make you more fun to be around, perhaps. So it's, socially, it's more civilizing for you to try and act. But as far as your own growth goes, it'll leave you empty. It'll leave you dissatisfied. And because there really isn't any meat there, it's all fluff. It's all smoke and mirrors. It's not really you. So that's the difference. Most of us go through our lives acting the way we think we should be, the way our culture tells us we should be, the way our families tell us that we need to be. We do an awful lot to have the right image to the people that we, to our boss, to our coworkers, to our friends, to ourselves. We work on image. And in our reality, it's kind of a sad fact, but in our reality, image is much more saleable, much more powerful, and much more useful than truth.
Yeah.
Truth isn't what makes things happen. Image is what makes things happen. If you're going to get a job, it's not that somebody really knows you and knows you so well that they know the truth of how you're going to work in that job and your attitude and how you're going to approach it and everything else. It's your image. It's what do you look like when you walk in? How comfortable are you? How do you speak? Do you sound nervous? Do you sound confident? It's all image. And if you've got the better image, you'll get the better job. So what happens to us for the most part is image-based. So we work on those images because those images are important. The truth of us is not all that important. The truth of us is scary because you see, we can mold that image. We can make that image up to whatever it is our boss wants. Oh, our boss wants us to be more confident. All right. We'll just be more confident when we're around the boss. Not hard to do. So we can modify that, but who we are, we're stuck there. That's just who we are. So people are a little afraid of being authentic because what if that doesn't play well? What if authentic doesn't get you that job, doesn't make your boss happy? Well, then that's a problem, you see. So because we are basically insecure and because we basically feel kind of inadequate inside, we would rather depend on our image getting us through life than we would depend on us getting ourselves through as whole, authentic people through life. That makes us feel more likely we're going to get through life if we can manipulate it, if we're in control of it, you see. Whereas who you are, you're not really so much in control of that, at least not quickly. So that's why, people are like that. It's just our culture. It's the way we are. So people, the average person, if you ask them, who are you really authentically, right down at the core level, who and what are you? They have no idea. They wouldn't be able to answer that question. And if you took them there on a journey, they'd probably push back and wouldn't want to go. They'd probably say, no, this is getting a little uncomfortable now. I don't want to go there. All those fears and things that we have that we just kind of push away, push them down into our subconscious. If you're authentic, you got to look at all those. You got to bring them all out. That's a part of you. You got to own them, you see. And most people are too afraid of their fears to actually grab hold of them and stare them in the eye and own them. So that's, you see, it's easy to control your image. It's a lot more work to be authentic. That takes courage. You have to say, well, I'm going to be who I am, and whoever that is, well, that's the way I am. Now, if I don't like that, I can change who I am. That's called growing up. You can change who you are, and that's what we're all about here. But it's so much easier to just change your appearance or change what you look like or change how you act or, change what other people think of you. You can do that overnight. Changing yourself takes a lot of hard work. So that's why it's just the way we are.
I love it. That's such a great analogy, Tom. There's so many things that were just ring true that I can relate to on my own journey. So how do we get to that being part? Because you talked about, we can act kind, but if it's not coming from the fact that we genuinely are kind and being that way, then there's that disconnect. So we're playing all these roles all our life. So
Right.
What's the first step then? What tip would you give someone to listen if they do start to find the courage? Because it's normally the pain's got to be great enough, I'm finding, before they start to look inward.
Typically. Yeah. And the way that pain works, and the reason that courage is so hard to find, and the reason that we would like to control rather than just be whatever we are, is that we have fear. Fear is the core thing at the base of all of this that's causing the problem. You see, we're afraid if we're just ourselves, it's not going to work out that well. Matter of fact, we don't even know who we are. We're afraid what we might find if we actually, went on a journey to find ourselves. And would that work? If I really find myself, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm going to, go walk out of my family and become a monk because that's what, I really feel like doing at my true self? Is it going to ruin my life, my family, my kids? What's going to go on? Am I going to quit my job and, go be a gardener because I really love gardening? What is it all about? So without control, we feel vulnerable. We feel, we have fear that if we can't control what's going on, then it might be bad. So we don't really want to go there. Okay, so how do you know? How do you know? When somebody is acting kind, they feel kind. They're looking around for situations where they can demonstrate their kindness. Like I say, they see somebody needs help, then they go over and help them. And they do that, and they feel like they are a kind person. But they may or may not be. They may just be a good actor. Somebody who wants to be kind. And they may really want to be kind, but that's still different than being kind. So how do you know the difference? How do you know whether you're acting or whether you're being? Well, one way to know is to look at your fear. It's your fear that creates all that acting to begin with. And how do you know whether or not you have fear? Well, most people have lots of fears that they don't even know they have. A lot of fears are just, we get them out of our childhood. We get them when we're 3 years old and 2 years old, and we don't know about these intellectually. They're not something we can pull out and say, oh yeah, I'm afraid of big dogs, because we don't know that. We just are a little hesitant to walk up to a big dog because we're just not so easy about that. Maybe we're just a little uneasy about that situation. We don't really know why, for the most part. So here's how you find a fear. And this is the connection to happiness, to, being satisfied. Like you said, you got to a point where you still were unhappy. It wasn't working, even though you thought you were doing it. Mm-hmm. Well, that's the difference. If you have fear, you're going to be unhappy. You're going to be struggling. You're going to constantly be unfulfilled. Your life is going to be like it seems superficial. It's not really connecting for you. You're going through the motions, but you're not really, feeling like you're getting anywhere. And that's going to be your life, which makes you stressful. That stress will also bring a lot of the fear out. So you find the fear by looking for something negative, a feeling. You see, our feelings reside at our being level. Our feelings don't come out of our intellect. Nobody says, oh, that person just said something rude to me, I think I should get angry. You see, that's coming out of the intellect, but nobody does that. Somebody says something to you that you take as an insult. You don't think about, should I get angry? You just respond, right? That's your being level. So the fears live in your being level, and all your feelings and emotions live in your being level as well. So when you have a feeling that's negative, and negative is a long list, even things like stress comes in negative, annoyance, anger, you feel like you're not appreciated, or you feel like you're, whatever. It's just anything that's negative, anything that's not full of joy and peace and happiness and, I'm not nice. If it's not like that, then there's fear involved in it. So that's the difference between being happy and struggling and feeling kind of empty and like you're not quite getting it and things aren't quite working right. It's the fear. So look for a negative thing. What makes you angry? What gets you annoyed? What gets you upset? What gets you to start complaining? And that sort of thing. That's all negativity. If you trace that back, you'll find that negativity is a part of your ego, and your ego is a part of your fear. So you trace everything negative right back to a fear. Why are you getting angry? Well, I'm angry that person said something that belittled me. And the reason that makes me angry, you'll find the fear is that you feel kind of inadequate yourself. And when somebody says something that belittles you, it just stokes up that fear of being inadequate because they're saying something that kind of verifies your fear. And that's why you get angry. It's that fear of being inadequate that makes you angry, you see. And what we do instead of looking for the cause of that negative feeling, that anger, we just blame it on somebody else. We say, oh, Fred just made me angry. He just said such and such and such, and that makes me angry. So it's not about me. I don't have any problems. You know, it's not my growing up problem. It's Fred makes me angry. So we turn around and blame all of our negativity on somebody else that makes us be that way. Well, it's not like that. So you have to take responsibility for all of your feelings. They're your feelings, and you can choose to be that way or not. So when you get rid of those fears, Fred may say something that before just really upset you. It won't upset you anymore. You'll still be just as happy after he said it as before he said it. It won't matter because you'll realize it's not about you. It's about Fred. This is Fred's opinion. It's about him. It's about his fear, his anger, his needs. You know, that's what it's about. And if anything, you have compassion for Fred. And because you realize he's miserable, he's not unhappy, he's feeling, unfulfilled and marginal and everything else. And that's why he acts that way. So instead of anger from you, Fred gets compassion instead, you see, because you realize it's not you, because you don't have that fear anymore. But when you think it is you, somebody's pointing out you're inadequate, well, now you got to fight back about that. Just like we started, why don't I, kind of argue with people who disagree with me? Well, because I don't have anything to sell. You see, you don't get upset with people if you don't have this fear that gets triggered when somebody says something. You don't really have anything to defend. You're just you, and you're okay with that. You see, you're authentic, and there's not a problem there. And if other people don't like that, well, other people either have to deal with it or, like it or lump it. It's one of those things, but it doesn't bother you. It's not your problem. Just like I don't get bothered when somebody, rants about how awful, MBT is and how none of it makes sense. It's not a problem for me. It's not my problem. It's, it's their problem. Yeah. So that's kind of the way it goes. So if you're not a happy person, if your life is not full of joy, if you don't feel satisfied, if your life isn't full of quality, then you have fear. And those fears come out as negative feelings. And those negative feelings will take you right to the fear that's at the root of it. So then you have to get rid of that fear, and you do that with an intent. If you really have an intent to get rid of the fear, you really want to not feel inadequate anymore, so you don't get triggered, so you don't have these buttons that people can push and get these emotional reactions out of you. If you really want to do it, just the intention by itself will slowly get rid of the fear. That intention will cause you to be aware. Next time Fred says something that annoys you, you'll catch yourself and you'll say, oh, I feel that annoyance coming up. That's wrong. You're not saying that Fred's wrong. You're saying that you're messing up by letting that, pour out like that. And that you need to fix that. You need to not feel that way. And you just have this intention. I don't want to feel that way. And that'll take the edge off. So just having an intention, you will eventually get rid of it. But now, again, if it's acting, if you think instead of I don't want to be that way, you think I don't want to act that way. So now when Fred gets angry, I'll learn how to smile and stuff that anger, right back down to the bottom where it doesn't show. Now you're acting, you see, and it doesn't help at all. It just makes everything worse because now you've got more things to be angry about. So acting doesn't work here. It has to be a sincere intent to get rid of the fear.
Yeah, I love it, Tom. And I guess the challenge then is being present enough during your day to notice when you react that way.
Yes.
and having the intent to feel compassion instead of frustration in that moment. Because our feelings, they feel real. So because they feel real, we see the world that way, which I guess taints the lens and what we're perceiving at that moment in time.
Well, yes, everybody lives in their own personal reality. We think that there's this one reality out here and we all share it. It's not like that. There are parts of it that we share, but we create our own reality and we live in a reality that is unique to us. And what we think the world is and the way it is just our own interpretation of the data we get. Okay, so we get to interpret the data. And that's our reality. It's how we interpret the data. The way the reality works is you get a data stream. All right. And in this reality, you can think that's your sense data. You've got 5 senses. You've got your hearing, your sight, your touch, your taste, your feel, and that's your data. And that you get that in, and it's really digital information. It's little pulses, get generated by photons, and usually turns into electrical impulses once it gets inside your nervous system. So it's digital information, and you interpret that. You interpret that little pulse as a tree or a flower or whatever it is. So your interpretation is your reality, you see. So people who, let's say, live in very different cultures, have very different attitudes. They see the world very differently. They live in different realities. They don't live in the same reality that we do. They don't have the same metaphors, perhaps. A very good example of this is the, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, right? Well, males and females interpret the world differently. There's some fundamental ways that they just interpret the world that are different. So that's the problem in communication between the sexes, is because we say something, and we guys will say something and we think it's perfectly clear what we intend or what we mean, but a female will take that data, interpret it to mean something else altogether. Well, it's not that she's wrong because she interpreted it wrong. That's her reality, you see, and you have your reality. They're just different. It's not that there is this right reality someplace and then people are either right or wrong. It doesn't work that way. Everybody has their own reality through their own interpretation of the data they get. And if we all come from the same culture, more or less, and we have pretty much the same metaphors we use for things, then we will tend to think that we live in the same reality because we'll see things the same way. We'll all agree that, this thing here beside me is a table and I have stuff sitting on it. Well, you take somebody out of the jungles of Amazon who have never seen a table, they won't look at it and see it as a table. You see, it won't be a table to them. It'll be something else. They won't maybe know what it's good for. So it's just because we share a culture and share things in the culture and share the metaphors by which we describe our experiences, do we begin to believe that we all live in the same reality? Well, not really. But the more different we are, like male and female, the more, mismatched we are as far as communicating.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the nature of the way things work. We do live in our own personal reality. And the idea that that guy's reality is wrong, that means that you define your own reality as right. And if his reality is different than yours, then it must be wrong. You see, well, that's called, being arrogant, right? You get to define rightness, and anybody that's not like you is wrongness. And that's where a lot of our, ego comes in, and that's from our fear. So then we don't get along with other people unless they kind of represent an image of ourselves, and then we get along with them real well. So that's just the way people are, and they become very intolerant of other people who are obviously wrong. Well, you have to see those people as that's their reality. And if you think their reality is dysfunctional, then you don't change that by explaining to them why they're seeing it wrong. That will just make it worse. You see, you have to help them see it a different way, but not by lecturing. They have to get there on their own.
Mm.
You see, if you try to force it down their throat because you're right and they're wrong, all you'll do is make them angry. You know, there's more fear. And then they'll get belligerent, and you'll get belligerent, and, you know, and pretty soon, there's no communication at all. So you have to go to where they are. And this is true of any communication with anybody else. You have to go to where that person is you're trying to communicate to and try to understand what their reality looks like, and then put your data, what you're sending them, the ideas and the information you're trying to get to them, you have to put it in a context that they can see, that they can interpret, that makes sense to them. Because as long as you tell them things that don't make sense to them, well, you just make yourself look like an idiot that you don't really understand, you see.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we tend to talk past each other. You know, males and females do that all the time. You know, we see different things, we talk past each other. You know, she thinks that you're upset because she forgot to, you know, buy your favorite food or something. And you're not upset at all. You just notice that none of your favorite food in the refrigerator. You're not upset. But you tell her, hey, there's none of my favorite food in the refrigerator. She suddenly is upset because she thinks you're upset because she failed and she feels inadequate, and that's a fear of hers. So when you point out that she fails, now she's angry. What do you mean? I'm not in charge of your damn food. If you like that food, go buy it yourself, you see? And now you got an argument going just because of a misunderstanding of what was said and what was felt. So it's like that. And the more different we are, we see people in different cultures, we see different levels of education or experience. You know, people have never been more than 20 miles from where they were born, and people have traveled all over the world. All these people live in very different realities. And it's a mistake to think there's just one correct reality.
Yeah.
There isn't.
Is it possible to get to a point where we live without fear?
Yes, it's possible. It isn't easy, takes a long time, but it is possible that we can get to a point where we don't have any fear. And basically, when we get to that point, we're really happy people. You know, if you've sometimes been around, you know, if you've been around a lot of different people, you know, there's some people who just always are up. They always have something positive to say. They're just always nice to be around because there's no heaviness. There's no negativity that comes out of them. And even if something, horrible happens, they'll either accept it as the way it is, or they'll see a silver lining, in every dark cloud that you point out, they can show you the silver lining that where it's really not so bad after all, if you look at it from a different perspective. People like that have less fear. They're not so fearful. That's the way you act and feel when you get rid of your fear. Your life becomes full of happiness, full of joy. You feel very satisfied, and it's good. And, it doesn't matter that other people aren't there yet, because when you don't have the fear, that's okay. You can let people be however they are. So, we have people that look around today, they look, you read the news and you're convinced that we live in a hellish world, full of ignorant people who are always trying to grab whatever they can grab, and it's all self-centered and kind of nasty and greedy. And we look at the world and say, what an awful place. How could anybody be happy in this awful place? Well, it's your own fear that is creating your unhappiness, because you can be in an awful place, and instead of complaining about it, you think, well, how can I help? How can I make sure that the things I do and say are not part of the problem, that rather they're part of the solution? Well, if you start spewing fear too, oh yeah, isn't that awful? Yeah, those people always take advantage of everybody. If you get right in on that fear bandwagon, you're part of the problem. Even if the things you say are true, you're part of the problem. So it's you grow to not be part of the problem, to just be part of the solution. And then even if other people kind of are angry and they're not that grown up yet, just hanging out with you makes them feel better. They get a little lift up. So your light kind of shines out to other people, and they grow up a little bit, then their light shines and helps other people grow up. So it's infectious. And that's really what it's really what it's all about.
So the company you keep is really important as well, then.
Oh yes, company you keep is very important. I mean, we all know that about our teenagers, right? We have kids that are, 14, 15, 16, 17 in that age, and we know the company they keep is very, very important. But it's true at every age for everybody. The company you keep is very important. It can drag you down if you're around people who are constantly complaining, constantly upset, constantly worried. Then that's a drag. It makes you more that way because we have collective consciousness. It's not just our consciousness that's in a sealed, vacuum container and no other consciousness can affect it. We're all netted with each other. So you hang out with a lot of negative people and you will become more negative, which means you'll have less fun. You'll be more annoyed. You'll feel worse. It'll be harder to get up to go to work in the morning. Just everything will be more difficult. So that's the key. You want to be happy and have a good time and find joy in life, even if life is tough. You still can find joy in it. Well, get rid of your fear. That's the thing to do. That's the key thing.
Yeah, I was going to say the take-home message I get then from everything we just covered, Tom, is that if we're not happy, because we always look for the external to find our happiness. I find, if I buy this or if I meet that person or if I do that, then I will be happy. But it's to actually look at ourselves and look at our fears and start working on the fears.
Yeah. Yeah, buying stuff won't make you happy, or at least not for long, because it's all superficial. It makes you think you're happy. At the intellectual level, you say, "Oh, great! I finally got that sailboat I wanted. I've been wanting a sailboat my whole life," and you finally get it. And intellectually, you're very happy because you got something that you wanted. But that sailboat isn't going to make you happy. If you buy it for that reason because you want it, you might win the lottery and you may have $100 million in the bank, but that doesn't make you happy. You can't buy happiness, and happiness doesn't come from without. It has to come from within. The only way you can find happiness is to get rid of your fear. As long as you have fear, you're going to be unhappy. You're going to find life is hard. You're going to find that you don't feel satisfied and there's something missing in your life and you kind of don't know what it is. And the older you get, the more cranky you get because there's less time to find that happiness and you don't know what to do about it. And, it goes bad. It keeps getting worse as you get older.
Yeah.
You find a lot of kids, you get teenagers, and they're pretty happy for the most part. I guess, well, I shouldn't even say that. They got so many hormones going on. They got all kinds of downs and ups going on all the time. They're very unstable from a psychological viewpoint. But basically, they approach life more positively. You don't find cynics among 14-year-olds like you find cynics among 50-year-olds. As we get older, we tend to get more cynical. We've been there, done that. We know it. It sucks. Life is too hard. There is no way to make it. The system's against me. You get all of this stuff gets integrated into somebody who then gets pretty cynical about life. And it's that cynicism that kind of sucks you dry. It just gets worse.
Yeah.
The older you get, that gets worse. So it's the time to get rid of your fear and become happy is like now. Don't say, well, when I get old and retired, I'll work on it. By then you'll be like a rock, with a barrier walls all around you, made out of hard cynicism, and that's not the time to start working on it.
Yeah,
time like now.
Oh, totally. And it's funny because when I started looking at the deep-seated fears that I have, Tom, I'm so. The moment I actually went and started looking at them, I went on. It became a wild ride, but at the same time, I'm forever grateful for the lessons it's been given me, and I feel happier. There's just no two ways about it, nothing has come close to substituting it.
No, when you're growing up, when you're in a process of becoming and you're growing and you're getting rid of fear, it's a wonderful place to be in because every time you get rid of another fear, It's just like somebody took, you know, a 50-pound weight, you know, out of your backpack. Everything is just better. So even if your fear had to do with, you know, like inadequacy or insecurity, it doesn't matter. You get rid of a fear and all your relationships get better too, because that fear reaches out and touches everything. So as you get rid of your fears, everything gets better. And the more you can go through life asking, like, what can I give? How can I help? Rather than what can I get and how can I keep it? You know, then, you know, your life gets better and better. And when you stop giving up trying to control things, you know, you don't need to control everybody's opinion of you. You don't need to control much at all. And you get to a point, it's kind of funny, but you get to a point where you give up control altogether. You're just not trying to control anything. And when you get there, suddenly everything just falls into place much better than if you were the master of control. You know, and it's one of those aha moments you get to, because you give up control, and 6 months later, it's like, well, if I were the person in charge of the universe, I couldn't have made things work out any better than they did, you know. So, you know, what's the point in trying to be the master of the universe and controlling everything? Because that is, the point isn't what you can control. The point is how you can grow up. And growing up doesn't require you to control anything. So you can succeed without control. And it's the funniest thing, because you think that if I don't try to control life to a certain extent, life's just going to get chaotic. The only thing that keeps it together is that I keep pushing it back in the box as it gets wild and out of control. I keep it going. You know, I make sure the kids stay in their bound. I make sure the wife stays in her bound. I stay in my, you know, everybody stays in their bounds, and everything stays under control. Otherwise, it'll all go to hell. But it's you trying to keep it all under control is what makes it all bad. If you just let it be and accept people the way they are, interact, be authentic, and connect, you'll find that everything you need falls at your feet just as you need it. You don't go wanting for anything. Whereas if you try to make everything fall at your feet as you need it, it's a constant struggle, and it never works. It's like trying to get too many clothes in a suitcase. Every time you get one thing done, something pops out over on the other side. And it's like, if I could just get to here, if I could just get that new job, then everything would be great. And if you get that new job, oh, you feel great for, you know, a little while, but then after that, it's the same old stuff. You still don't feel great anymore. It's just different now. And you don't seem to ever be making any progress. That's the way most people live their life. They've got this, just one more thing. If I could just get those kids out of college and, you know, on their own, wow, you know, everything's going to be great. But it's not about your environment. It's about your, you know, your exterior environment. And those other people, it's about your interior environment. That's where the happiness and the peace comes from.
Yeah, it's such a paradox, isn't it? And it requires faith. Like, it requires that act of letting go, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, I'd say it requires courage.
Courage.
Because instead of faith that it's going to work out good, you need to just accept it however it works out, and just have the courage to be it. So it doesn't really, if you're looking for faith, you probably have expectations, and you want to have faith that those expectations are going to come out the way you want. You see, so you're still kind of trying to control it. You get to the point that you're just going to be authentic. You're going to be who you are. You're going to observe how that works. If it doesn't work well, you're going to change who you are. And by work well, you judge on how successful you are being part of the solution. Yeah. That's how you judge whether it's working well or not. You know, are you part of the solution? Are you able to give? Are you able to be helpful? And if you are, then good. If not, then change the way you are, but stay authentic. So in that case, you don't have any expectation of what it's going to be like. You'd have to accept it's going to be whatever it is. And that takes courage.
Courage.
There's no guarantee that it's going to, you know, that you're going to have all the beer you want to drink. There's no guarantee you're going to have all the money you want to spend, because that's not what's important. But what they will guarantee you, you'll have plenty of opportunities to grow up. And if you grab those opportunities, you will grow up. And if you do grow up, it won't matter how much beer you have to drink or how much money you have to spend. You'll be a happy camper. You see? So that's the way it works. But we want to control things. You know, we spend our time mostly thinking about how we can manipulate things to be the way we want them. We look at the near future and we plan and we say, well, I'm going to arrange things this way so they come out the way I want. And a lot of the time they don't come out the way you want. So now it's plan B, you know, now you have to manipulate something else. And in as much as these things are all under your control, well, you can be pretty successful. But in as much as they are other people that have to be at the right place at the right time, you know, your kids have to, you know, become doctors and lawyers and not drug addicts. And, you know, you've got all the stuff that you need to have happen a certain way. Then if it's about other people being the way you need them to be, you'll almost always fail. And you'll always be on a plan B, then a plan C, then a plan D. And you find out that it's your attempt to control it, to make it come out the way you want, that keeps it from coming out the way you want. And that's a big aha moment. It's you trying to control it is the problem. Once you stop controlling it and start giving to the situation, you know, just giving your kids advice or things, but not telling them how to be or what to do. No, I'm talking about older kids, you know, 16, 17, 18-year-old kids, you know, then you'll find that things will work out much better as much as you keep pushing them to be the way you know is best for them to be because you've been there and done that and you know, then it's unlikely that they're going to be what you want. They'll go the other way because they have to be themselves. They can't be your puppet. They need to make their own decisions, their own free will. And if anybody's trying to push them, they push back. And they'll go just the opposite direction, which is how they try to train you to stop trying to tell them what to do. You see? So it turns out that if you give up the idea of how can I make things come out the way I want and just say, well, I'll accept whatever comes, I'll accept, and I'll deal with it in the most caring and loving and positive way I can. Whatever comes, I'll just deal with it that way. Now suddenly you don't have all the worries and the load that you used to have before. You can just deal with things. And then life becomes like a puzzle. What's the best way to deal with this? You know, what's the most positive way? How can I lower the most amount of entropy in the system and for myself through what actions? And now life is a puzzle and a fun puzzle. And when you get it right, you feel really good. When you get it wrong, well, you get a little pain. So that helps you, you know, that points you in the right direction.
Yeah. Wonderful, Tom. Wonderful. I'm just aware of the time, so I'm going to change gears and ask you a few questions, Tom,
okay,
that I ask everyone on the show. And the first one is, what's one of your low points in your life you've had, but later in life turned to be a blessing?
Well, I don't know. I haven't had a whole lot of low points in my life. I don't know that I have anything that was really too terrible, but all of them turned out to be a blessing. I don't know that, you know, all of them turned out to be good because they put you someplace that's better. The thing is, we have expectations. We have a plan that we want to be somewhere, someplace. And as it turns out, often, if that plan doesn't work out, we feel bad. Well, we didn't get the promotion. We got overlooked. So we feel really bad and depressed about that because we know we really deserved it better than the person that got it. But what does that mean? Well, it may mean you decide to get another job. Well, that's maybe the start of something a whole lot better. So you don't know. So instead of worrying about what you can't control, better to open up new opportunities. So I don't know how to answer that.
That's fine.
If I think about things that were really like, oh no, it's hard to find any of them. I had to go back like 30 or 40 years and dredge them up someplace. I can't really think of things that, I've been like I've been weird like this for a long time. So I have to go way back, probably when I was a teenager or a kid or something. And
that's a great place to be, Tom. It truly is. I got next question. What does your morning routine look like?
My morning routine: get up whenever, but usually that's about 7. 6:30 to 7:30, somewhere in that range, because I'm retired, so I don't set alarms. I just try to go to bed early enough that I can get up at a reasonable time. So 6:30 to 7:30, I get up, and then I exercise, and I do exercises for about 2 hours worth of exercise, and that's not counting the getting ready and the taking the shower after, whatever. It's usually about 2 hours worth of exercise, and I do on, let's say, a typical week would be Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. I do heavy weights, and then on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, I just do core muscles and balance and that kind of thing. I don't do really weights at all. I do the stuff that's between your belly button and your solar plexus. All the stuff in your core, which is where all your balance comes from. And you don't really exercise that when you're doing heavy weights, but that's the stuff that makes you coordinated, that gives you balance, that makes you kind of walk with a smooth gait, and it's all those little muscles. So I do those. So that's 6 days out of 7 I do some sort of exercise, and some of that is stretching, but most of it is not. So I do a little bit of stretching. So that's where I start. Then after that, I get something to eat, and I tend to just eat raw food, mostly vegetables and fruits. A few other things get tossed in there. I live on green smoothies. That's greens and vegetables and some fruit all ground up together. Now mine are very green heavy. I have more greens in my green smoothies than the typical green smoothie. Is usually pretty sweet. It has a lot of fruit in it, but mine has got a lot of greens in it. Then I go sit down at my computer, and I've got more to do there than I can possibly do in a day. I get 300 emails or so every day.
Oh, wow.
And I try to look at every one. I try to answer the ones that I think are real important. I don't have time to answer them all, but I do get a chance to look at them all. So I have that. I can't always get to them all, and that's kind of a sad part, because I'd like to get to them all, but I just don't have time. I've got these experiments now that I'm working on. We just did a Kickstart program, so we got some finances now to get the experiments done. So I'm working on that. I also, sell these books. Every My Big T.O.E book that's sold anywhere in the world, I have to do something to make that sale work. I'm in the loop. So it's not like I just send that off and somebody else takes care of that. I have all that business to take care of. And every time somewhere in the world somebody's book doesn't show up on time, that doesn't deliver, gets lost in the mail, I'm the one that has to deal with doing that too. Well, that's not true. Not all the time. If it comes from like a bookstore or Amazon, then they take care of it. But if they come out of my website, I have to take care of those. So I've got those kinds of things going on. I've got 8 grandchildren, and I spend time with them. I've got a wife, and she's just retired a year and a half ago. So we have more time to spend together now and do things. I live in a big house, which means there's always a lot of maintenance. It needs to be done. So there's a honey-do list that's a mile long of all the things that need to be attended to. So I'm just busy, and I usually work until I can't do it anymore, which is usually about 10, 11 o'clock. And I start to feel like I'm getting kind of naughty at my work, and I'm not any longer effective. And then it's time to go to bed and start it all over again. Now, sometimes if I can get things wound up to a good spot, I'll quit around 7 or 8, and I'll go down and sit with my wife, and we'll listen to audiobooks or just chat, hang out together. So I enjoy those evenings more than ones until I work till you drop.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy those nearly as much. So I try to get more of the ones where I go spend time with her in the evening before going to bed. So then I get up and do it again. So that's my life. I work more hours now than I did when I was being paid. So all
That's
my work
amazing,
now
Tom.
is just
Well, I've been following you for a couple of years, if not longer. I can't remember. I think Richard, mutual friend who introduced me to you, And I've been following like the amount of content that's going out there, and I'm the amount of people that are subscribing to your YouTube and turning up to your events. Like it's just this thing that just keeps growing and growing and growing.
It has been, and the more it grows, the more it demands, of my time. But yeah, I have now over 500 videos on YouTube, and those 500 videos probably average about, at least an hour a piece, maybe more, probably more like an hour and a half a piece. So that's a lot. We're talking, close to 1,000 hours worth of video out on YouTube. And I hope another one of the jobs that I'd like to do would be to take all of that video and annotate it by subject. So if somebody's interested in a particular subject, they'll get a list of videos that, at times, go to this video at, 1 hour and 12 minutes. And, there you'll find that subject being talked about. I'd like to do that because it would make them a lot more useful. Somebody now like yourself comes on and says, well, I'm going to look at some of his videos and see what he's about. They get to my YouTube channel and there's, 1,000 hours worth of video. It's like, overwhelming. How do I start? How do you dig into something that massive? So I need to make some tools that make it more accessible.
Got it.
And that's kind of on my to-do list, but it's hard to work all that in.
Yeah, I can only imagine, mate. I can only imagine. It's very inspiring what you're doing and how you live your life, Tom. Last question for you: is there anything you'd like to leave our listeners today to ponder on with everything that we've covered today?
Well, I guess mostly today we talked about being and love and fear and feeling happy or sad, those kinds of things. What's significant in daily life, and I guess I would leave them with that is really what's most important. I do physics as well, and I have these experiments that maybe will change the nature of science and quantum mechanics, and all of that's interesting, but that's not really where the most significance is. The most significance isn't in the physics, and I'm a physicist, but even to me, that's not where the most interest is. The most interest is exactly what we've been talking about: how to grow up, how to get rid of your fears, how to realize if you're feeling kind of empty and things just, well, you're going through the motions, you got a house in the suburbs, 2.5 kids, 2 cars in the garage, and your job is okay, but why am I not really happy? Why am I still looking for more? And why is it just doesn't feel like it's really working out the way I thought it would? Well, that you can fix all that. You can be happy. So the thing is that don't point your finger and say, well, I'm that way because my boss is an idiot, because, I've got to put my kids through college, so I'm financially wrapped in this. Don't start blaming all your environment about why you're stressed. You're stressed because you choose to be stressed. You choose to be stressed because you have fear. So there is something you can do about it. So to the average person out there is don't give up. Don't just say, I'm stuck on this treadmill and I really don't have any, way to get off. You're not. You just think you are. It just seems like you're there. The only person that you can change is yourself. So start there with getting rid of your fear. Like I said, think of anytime you feel anything negative. Well, there's your lead to a fear. Get rid of it, work on it, and your life will get better and better and better. And all your relationships will get better, and your relationship with your kids will get better. Your work will get better. You'll be more productive everywhere in your life. If you just do that, everything will get not only happier, but more productive. So that's the thing I would say to your listeners. That's really where the significance is. It's not about the theory. It's not about the physics. It's really just about life. It's about growing up. We're here to grow up. And if you're focused on that, everything else can just, can work its way in whenever you get to it. It's not that important, but that's what's important. But that's the thing we tend to leave till last. We got everything else we got to do and control. And the very last thing we work on is ourselves, because we don't really want to admit there's really anything wrong there. So that's I guess the thing I'd leave them with is that what we've been talking about is the key thing. there's a whole lot more. I mean, my theory talks about all sorts of stuff, and lots of gee whiz bang and stuff going on, and it talks about science and parapsychology and all sorts of things that are interesting. But this is the core.
Yeah,
it's being authentic. Grow up, change yourself, be better, and if you focus on that, the rest will all take care of itself.
Tom, that's a wonderful note to end it on, and that's just beautiful, mate. And where can we send the listeners? What's your URL, website URL, if they want to learn more?
Well, they can go to my website, which is www.mybigtoe.com, and you can put hyphens between the My Big Toe, my-big-toe. That'll work. That's actually the site I own, or you can just put in My Big Toe, which will also work because the guy that owns that lets me use it for $10 a month. So if it ever just stops working, then you can put the hyphens in and it'll still work. So you can go there, and that will take you to YouTube and to other places, or you can go to YouTube. But if you forget all of that, you can go. Well, the other thing I should say is you can get my books for free at Google Books. From the very first book that I published when they first came out in 2003, I put them on Google Books and gave Google the rule that let 100% be readable. So they've been there. The downside is reading them on a computer isn't a whole lot of fun, and it's the first version. It's the first printing, because that was the first one that came out. I put it out on Google. It's still the same what's there. I'm on like printing number 7 or 8 now. So there's been a lot of little details that have changed, but it's still 98% the same thing. So you can get the books, you can get the books for free on Google Books. You can buy them anywhere you can buy books. They're in bookstores and libraries, and if they're not there, you can ask for them and they'll get them. So, the other place is to find out where I'm going to be. I do have people that kind of keep track of my events and where I go and the things I do, places, and that is www.mbtevents.com. So you go there, you'll find out in another 2 or 3 weeks I'm going to be in Tennessee giving an intensive, which is a very intensive program to teach people how to experience the larger conscious system, to get out of this reality into a bigger reality. How to do that, what to do, how to do it, what to make of it, what to do while you're there, this sort of thing is what that's about. So I do those every so often.
Have you got any plan for 2019 and 20? Those?
Yeah, they've got. Matter of fact, 2019 is mostly booked.
Wow.
Yeah, we put stuff out and it books like in weeks. I got some things going on next year, also at TMI, the Monroe Institute. I'm going to do a couple of sessions, and I don't know whether those have been announced yet. They usually fill up quickly too.
Yeah, wow.
So, when we do these things that are intensives, you can't have but so many people and really make it work, because I'm the coach. It's not lecture, it's all experience. Yeah. So I make up my own concoction of binaural beats that help put you in the right altered state, and you go experience, but then you come back and you'll have a million questions. This happened, that happened, why did that happen? Nothing's happening, and I'm basically coach. So you can't do that. I can't coach 100 people, very well. I can coach maybe 20 or 30. And after that, it gets a little difficult because most people have similar questions. So when you answer one's question, you answer a lot of people's questions.
Got it.
So that works out. So yeah, I'm just busy. My schedule is almost locked up through 2019, and they want to do it through 2020. And I've been trying to restrain them and say, hey guys, wait a while, let's catch up a little bit. Too much.
There's no stopping.
It's fun. It's fun. I enjoy it.
Clearly, I can see that. Well, Tom, look, I'll do my best to share this with everyone I know. It was a wonderful interview today. I'll link to the show notes for the listeners. And I genuinely appreciate you giving me your time today, knowing how busy you are and sharing your wisdom with us all. So thank you so much, Tom.
You're welcome. Send a copy of it to Donna at MBT Events. And if you do that, then she'll put it up on my website. If you can send her actually the video, then she'll put it up. And the advantage to you is that you can put a little thing that advertises your blog right up on the front. And I've got about 40,000 subscribers, and I don't know how many million views. So it'll give you a lot of play to introduce you to new people. If you give me the whole thing, but if all I get is a link, I put that up too, but that has to go in the, I don't know, there's a name. It goes in another section where you just put the links, and the link doesn't send out a letter, doesn't send out an email to everybody saying, hey, there's a new video up. You see, otherwise 44,000 emails go out to my subscribers when a new video comes up. So if you want a piece of that, then you got to send Donna the whole thing.
Will do.
And I like that better because more people will see it.
Yeah.
And that's my whole point in doing this, is that more people will see it. That's how I become part of the solution. The more people I can reach, then the better it is. So So if you would do that, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Anything, Tom. No problem at all. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Been my pleasure, Guy. We'd do it again, and it's been fun. I hope your listeners learn something that can help them out.
I think you blew their minds today. No, I truly do.
It's what I do best. All right. Well, have a good evening.